and you recognize that, and I tell you that, you meet me at the door, and I say, hey, Julius, so what would you suggest I have? Because I want the experience, and I want good food. I'm hungry, but I want to know what makes this a Southern kitchen. What makes this the sauce boss? What makes this something, an experience that'll have me coming back? What do you serve me?
I would probably serve you some collard greens, mac and cheese, and pork chops.
Mac and cheese, collard greens, and pork chops. See, this is why Will and I are the ones here at the restaurant, because we hold it down for the big backs.
Yeah, that brother's starving.
Been here quite a few times.
And collard greens are ironically a Greek vegetable.
Okay.
But they grow in many climates. They grow real easily. So they're brought here for the slaves to cultivate because they can grow in any climate and it's cheap and that's something they can eat. So, collard greens, something that is a Greek dish, was brought here and cooked in kind of an African way. So my grandmother, she was a single mom of 10, and she raised 10 kids in the Chicago projects by herself.
Wow.
And after she raised her kids, they all grew up during the crack epidemic. So a lot of my cousins, my brother and I grew up on the streets, crack houses, homeless shelters. But if we ever made it to grandma's house, she always had food in the fridge. She still cooked like she had 10 kids, even though she was living by herself.
Right.
So when we got to her house, she'd always tell us, there's food in there, So that was at least one meal we got per day. And I wanted this restaurant to kind of be like my ode to my family and to my grandmother, to give people kind of that grandma's house vibe. Come in, get some good hearty food, and fall asleep on your way home,
Absolutely.
I felt the spirit. And so on the way home, I told my wife, that's why we were dating. On our way home, we lived in different apartments up in Ogden. But on our way home, I told my girlfriend, who's not my wife, I said, hey, right now it's February. I'm guessing in December, I'll probably want to talk to some missionaries. She scoffed and started cracking up like I told her the biggest joke ever,
Welcome everybody to this very special episode of Brothers in the Foyer. My name is Crispin. With me, I've got
Will.
Big Will right here. And our very special guest today is Julius Thompson. You know him as the Sauce Boss here in Draper, Utah. And we're here at his very established and very delicious restaurant, Sauce Boss Southern Kitchen here in Draper, Utah. And welcome to the show. Thank you so much for giving us the time to talk about, you and where you come from, your food, and your book as well. So thank you so much for being on.
My pleasure.
With us.
Pleasure.
So today, before we get started, as always, we want you to like, subscribe, share, follow us on all social media platforms, including YouTube. And we're going to get into the episode now. So first and foremost, we want to know who you are. So who is Julius Thompson, and how did he end up here in Draper, Utah, of all places?
I am like most people who come to Utah, seeking peace and tranquility, some quietness. And I came from a harsh background, heavy background, but I was able to take all of that and turn it into something palatable, something edible, and take all of my past and produce something beautiful out of it to share with other people.
I love that. So you came to Utah seeking peace, a way to kind of get away from your background and things like that. So what made you decide when you came to Utah, of all places, seeing the demographic and thing around, they need some of my food. They need some soul food. What brought you into that realm?
Well, I've been here about 20 years, and I noticed that there was lots of different types of restaurants, but it was mainly soul food restaurants. And there's a good demographic of Black people that has been more plentiful over the years, but still nothing that kind of represents that culture. And I did a food truck, and for the food truck I did Italian food with my own little twist on it because nobody else is doing that. But when I wanted to do a restaurant, I wanted to do something that represented my family, my culture, and the history of soul food. I feel like soul food is the one food that's like truly American.
Yeah.
It's something that came from slaves that they passed on to their descendants when they had nothing else to pass on. Mm-hmm. And that's why anywhere you go in the country, in the black home, there's somebody that's making this kind of food. It's something that's not just directly with the South. It's kind of just nationwide, this kind of food. So I wanted to show people what some of the food of black culture to help them to understand and celebrate, and also to educate people on the kind of food that it is.
I love that. I love that.
Yeah, I guess so that inspiration came from your ancestry, to do something like this. If someone was to come today, what would they see on their plate, or could you talk a little bit more to that?
Yeah. So my grandmother, she was a single mom of 10, and she raised 10 kids in the Chicago projects by herself.
Wow.
And after she raised her kids, they all grew up during the crack epidemic. So a lot of my cousins, my brother and I grew up on the streets, crack houses, homeless shelters. But if we ever made it to grandma's house, she always had food in the fridge. She still cooked like she had 10 kids, even though she was living by herself.
Right.
So we got to her house. She'd always tell us, "There's food in there," So that was at least one meal we got per day, and that meal was the soul food that that they always had at parties and get-togethers. And I wanted this restaurant to kind of be like my ode to my family and to my grandmother, to give people kind of that grandma's house vibe. Come in, get some good hearty food, and fall asleep on your way home.
Absolutely.
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely. I love that.
So as a business owner, you're a business owner here. You said you've been here for about 20 years. What are some challenges that you've faced when trying to get this started, or some challenges that you may be able to share with us and maybe some other entrepreneurs out there that are in the same industry as you are?
One of the challenges was we opened up this restaurant May of 2019. So it was a Chinese restaurant for 10 years, and they wanted to retire. We took over, and we spent 2 or 3 months cleaning and make sure everything was perfect to start cooking in. We had a grand opening, a ribbon cutting, and it was packed for the first 9 months, and then immediately we got shut down with the pandemic.
Yeah.
After all that.
Wow.
Yeah.
So you're talking opening expenses, purchasing the restaurant, opening labor costs. Because when you're opening a restaurant, you got to have extra labor for it to train everybody. There's a lot of food waste because you're training everybody.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And all that got pushed to a halt when the pandemic hit. So we had 2 years of only takeout only. So our sales dropped by 60%, and we couldn't have anybody in here. It was all to go. So that was a big challenge, because I think Utah lost almost 400 small business restaurants because of that.
Absolutely.
And a lot of my food truck family, a lot of them lost their businesses as well. But I noticed that people were still wanting to eat out and feed their families. So what I did is I created a family meal kind of platter. And it was just this big disposable pan full of chicken, cornbread, 2 sides, and you just take the whole platter home. And we would just, per pandemic, we would take it to their car, and they wanted us to put it on top of the car and go back inside, then they'll get out and grab it.
Right,
a lot of
absolutely.
people wanted it that way.
Uh-huh.
But that allowed us to kind of stay relevant. So when the pandemic ended, people didn't forget about us.
Yeah.
Man, the pandemic was such a crazy time. And it's really cool to see that you were able to be fortunate enough to make it through that as one of the major challenges there. But I really want to know, Utah and a lot of cities are like this as well, where you go to the city and people there's things to see, there's places to go visit, but one of the main attractions to different cities that you travel is the food. You want to get that essence of food that you're not going to get anywhere else, but maybe in this particular place. So you get to Utah and they don't have this food that so much of the United States is tied to, and you open up your restaurant. Have you noticed any, or what have you been able to do to kind of keep the menu kind of relevant or exciting or appealing, or have you just kind of stuck to, the go-tos that make it soul food and just ride with that?
I did what you said. I stuck to my roots, stuck to what I grew up with. I changed a couple of things, because any restaurant, you got to base it off your demographic.
Right.
I love fried gizzards, but my customers aren't going to eat fried gizzards.
Right.
I love chitlins. My customers aren't going to eat chitlins. They'll come in here and smell that and walk right back out. So I had to omit a couple things from my menu, but everything that's on my menu is food that I grew up with, food that my mom made and my grandmother made. And I think sticking to yourself, to your culture, is a big thing. I mean, I will say when we first opened, a lot of people, they said my food had too much flavor. You know, can you cut back on the garlic? Can you cut back on the pepper, the salt, the herbs? You know, Utah isn't a food mecca, so sometimes, you know, you have this kind of food and people have a hard time. It wakes their tongues up and they don't know what to do about it.
Right,
basically.
absolutely.
And there's also a lot of education. You know, people didn't know that things like okra and black eyed peas came from Africa. You know, so I had to educate people on the history of this kind of food. You know, customers come in and they say, if you're not from the South, how do you know to do this kind of food? So I got to explain them the whole history of soul food and things like that.
Absolutely.
And at times it makes them feel a little uncomfortable, but it's good to educate people to you know, get those hard questions answered.
I love that. Oh my gosh,
Yeah.
that is a whole other conversation right there. When we talk about the history of it and how soul food ended up coming from the South and spreading into Chicago, you know, Baltimore, DC, New York. That gets into a whole other conversation when you talk about migration that happened after you know, emancipation and the freedom of freeing of slaves. Excuse me, but what I'm just so intrigued by this particular business because, again, our demographic in Utah, there's not very many black people just yet. We're trying to get them to come on out. We're trying to get them to come on out. And there's a surprising number that we don't even realize there are, which is kind of how we, the brothers in the Foyer, got together in the first place. Okay. Realizing that there were other brothers like ourselves, and then we just, you know, kind of banded together. So we want to just kind of shed light on that. But you've been here 20 years, working with this business, sticking to what you know. When it comes to the food, are the recipes that you incorporate, do they come from grandma, do they come from mom, or do they come from Julius a little bit, where I took what I learned from grandma and maybe made it my own, or are you trying to stay true to what you remember? Like if you were to have a plate of your own food, does it take you back to grandma's house, or is it like more so look what you did, grandma, and look what I was able to do and take it to a new level?
I think it's kind of a mix of both. My grandma was old school, so when she cooked, she just threw everything in the bowl, and it came out amazing. I couldn't do that. I had to have a recipe. So I spent a couple years doing a lot of trial and error until I tasted nostalgia. So when I tasted like I was at my grandma's house eating food, that's when I knew I had the recipe right. You know, my wife is from here, and she loves my catfish, but she always tells me that my grandma's is always better. And but ironically, when I introduced my grandma to my wife, before we got married, she was my girlfriend, my grandma was cooking some catfish. And I sat down, we were eating catfish, and I offered some to my wife, and she goes, I don't want that. You know, I'm like, all right, keep watching us eat it.
Right.
You know, we kept eating it, and after like 10 minutes of watching us eat, she's like, let me try a piece. I tried a piece, and she ate all my plate. Ate the whole plate and ate it all. And so she was a good tester for my catfish. You know, she would taste, she goes, this is really good. Almost close to your grandma's, but not as good as your grandma's. And I'm like, that's the best I'm going to get. So,
I'll take that.
Yeah, absolutely.
All day.
And, but yeah, these are all my recipes. I like to be somebody that says, I created this. Even my cornbread. You can buy all kind of cornbread mixes online for your restaurant, but I want it to be my recipe. And that way I can feel like I created this. So I went about it the hard way, but at the same time, I have more appreciation of the hard work me and my crew does because it's, you know, my own recipes that I created.
That's awesome. That's what I wanted to hear. I wanted to know, were you able to kind of recreate grandma? Because, see, I grew up the same way. You know, my mom and my aunts used to cook for us, and those recipes come from what they know. They were raised by their grandmama as well. So those recipes come from my great-grandparents. Yeah. And try as I may, I have never made a piece of food that tasted anything like my mom or my grandma's. Don't get me wrong, I make good food, but it's definitely crispin and not grandma or my mom's. Okay. So I haven't gotten to a point to where I can taste nostalgia just yet. I've gotten to where it can taste good. Yeah. But that nostalgia is always different. So like whenever we get a chance to go home or when the kids get to go over to grandma's house, it's a whole different experience. And they'll eat a whole plate over at grandma's house. But with mom and dad, it's like, oh, we don't want this. Or, so we haven't gotten there yet. We're working on it. We're working on with that recipe. But you are just, the more and more I learn about you, the more amazed I am at how you've been able to flourish here. Yeah. And before I give Will a chance to ask his question, I just got one last one. So it's with your food. I'm coming into the restaurant for the first time. I've never been. maybe I don't even know anything about soul food. And you recognize that. And I tell you that, you meet me at the door. And I say, hey, Julius, so what would you suggest I have? Because I want the experience and I want good food. I'm hungry. But I want to know what makes this a Southern kitchen? What makes this the sauce boss? What makes this something, an experience that'll have me coming back? What do you serve me?
I would probably serve you some collard greens, mac and cheese, and pork chops.
Mac and cheese, collard greens, and pork chops. See, this is why Will and I are the ones here at the restaurant, because we hold it down for the big backs. We know how to eat, so and we've been here quite a few times. So that right there is a plate that I want to have. So you serve that plate to me, and I'm eating, and oh my gosh, I'm being woken up with different flavors and things like that. And I just ask you, hey, take me through this journey. If you were sitting there with me and walking me through this journey of this food, talk to me a little bit about what I'm experiencing.
I would say you're experiencing American history. You know, like fried pork chops is one of the oldest ways pork has been cooked. And, you know, you can go back to the 1800s of, you know, slaves with a cast iron pan full of lard cooking pork chops in it. You know, and the history of mac and cheese is kind of, it's kind of unique because it was one of the former presidents. I can't remember if it was Jefferson or Lincoln. He had a slave that was a cook. He would take him all over the place.
It was Jefferson.
Jefferson. Yeah, he took him to France. He learned a little bit, came back, made his mac and cheese dish. You know, Jefferson loved it. His wife loved it. She took the recipe and put it in the Virginia mom's cookbook, Virginia wife's cookbook. You know, and collard greens are ironically a Greek vegetable.
Okay.
But they grow in many climates. They grow real easily. So they're brought here for the slaves to cultivate because they can grow in any climate and it's cheap and that's something they can eat. So, you know, collard greens, something that is a Greek dish, was brought here and cooked in kind of an African way. You know, a little vegetables, some spice, some meat, stewed low and slow for a long time. And so, and those are all important because it shows the history of things and how we are kind of a melting pot, but a lot of it comes from survival and generational skill.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah.
Oh man, thank you so much for that. I wanted everybody to get an idea of what it would be like stepping into a restaurant for the first time. And if they haven't had this kind of food, or maybe this food your way, the Southern way, the soul food way, what that journey would be like. So I appreciate that. Thank you so much.
Yeah. And I love that. I love that perspective about you and your business, because I feel like growing up, I always knew it was something that our ancestors had ate, but I didn't know like the real story. And I love how you're sharing that with us, you know. And I think if you haven't been to Sauce Boss yet, like you need to come out, because you're not only getting good food, you're getting a really good story. Like these are facts that you're sharing, you know. Like this is the way that we've ate for years. And so it's I think it's really important that you not only come out to, you know, eat this good food, but, you know, learn more about, you know, Julius and what he's trying to do here, especially here in Utah. So
I love that. Now, what you also may not know about Julius, especially if you've been able to come out and experience the Southern kitchen, is that not only is he a great chef, not only is he great at making good food, but he also is an author of how many books was it?
One autobiography and then 12 children's books.
12 children's books and an autobiography. And I struggled with answering essays on my college questions. So, an accomplished author as well. And what you'll notice right here is we have his book called Pearls, the chronological interview of one of America's forgotten children by himself, Julius Thompson. So, want to speak to the book real quick so that people can go out and get it and understand what it's about. So, if you could give us an overview of what this book is.
Well, first off, explaining the cover. This woman on here represents the allure and the destruction of addiction. And when we were young, our house always had crack addicts in it. And the way they would dote over the crack and cherish it, hold on to it, and fight for it, instead of us, we always thought it must have been something precious. We always thought it was a pearl. And as she's wearing a pearl necklace, and as it gets to the center, it turns into crack. And as she touches it, she starts to decay. So again, it represents the allure and destruction of addiction. And half my grandmother's kids, out of the 10, half were addicted to crack cocaine. So I lived in homeless shelters on the streets. My brother and I had to sell drugs at 12 just to get school supplies, deodorant, food, and things like that. So it kind of explains the first 20 years of my life and what I went through. Every time my mother got put in prison, I had to find somewhere else to live. And I had family here, I had family in Chicago. So it talks about things that happened here, things that happened in Chicago. And it ends of me opening a restaurant and starting a family. So it's a heavy read, but it has a happy ending. And I created it once the pandemic happened. Because it was so slow into the restaurant, I couldn't let anybody in. I told myself, well, I'm bored, but I got 20 years of trauma I need to get out. So I might as well work on that. So I wrote this book for that, and also to let other people know who are in a similar situation that they too can get out of that situation if they just focus on building themselves up and proving that they're worth something. And also to shed a light on it for people who don't believe that people in this country go through certain things like this, like racism and poverty and things like that. So,
oh my gosh,
that's a huge success story. You know, to start where you were and then to end up where you are today. I know we've all talked about this. We kind of grew up in similar backgrounds where, you know, we come from single parent homes where the father was absent. You know, I share this. Most of my cousins sold drugs, and, you know, that was kind of the everyday, you know, what I would see as a kid. And it's amazing to be at this table with you, to hear that story and to see where you are today, and to kind of shed light on that, you know, you may have gone through that, or you may be going through that right now, but that doesn't have to be your destination. You know, there's more to life than those things. Absolutely. But they make you who you are, for sure. So.
Definitely.
You know, there's so many parallels to your story, our story, and so many of our viewers' stories as well when it comes to overcoming a lot of the challenges that we have in our background. Some of the nuances are more specific than others, but, you know, poverty is a shared experience. Single-parent household, shared experience. Large family being held down by maybe one parent at most, maybe, you know, two. With me in particular, with my mom and my aunts, all of their kids, we're all in one house. So it's me, my cousins, brothers, we all grew up as brothers. And these three ladies just raising all these gigantic boys, and we're all kind of built the same. So, you know, appetites were real, sports is real, school's real. They got to get us everywhere we need to go. And, you know, we come through adversity like that. So first off, if you come to Sauce Boss, not only are you going to get a story and an experience through the food that they serve here, but as you get a chance to meet Julius and read his book, which I hope you do because it's a great read, you're not only going to get the story of where we come from as a people through the food, but you're going to get an even more in-depth story of where this food comes from, in particular with Julius and his story and his family. But I do love one thing that you said on how it is a heavy read because these things are real, and it's not necessarily the things that people want to have happen to them, but it has a happy ending in the end because you were able to find your way through it and navigate through that into positivity, into a good landing space, into prosperity. So really quickly, you're LDS,
Yes,
just like we are. So I'm curious to know your path from where you came from to where you are now. How does the gospel, how does the church find its way in there? Is that something that you've been accustomed to your whole life? Or was there a journey to finding God in that way?
it was definitely a journey. And so my first experience with God was when I was about 6 years old. And then we were living in Rose Park, again, house full of crack addicts. I noticed around this age that people had like nice clothes and two parents. And I had a friend who was this young Asian girl. We'd always play outside. Her mom would call her in at night around 8 o'clock. I'd have to stay outside till 10 or 11 when all the addicts would wander off and I could finally go to bed. But I would always sit on the stairs and watch her go into her house and her family sit at the table and all eat food together. And it was like a TV show for me because it was so foreign.
Yeah.
And And one day I was watching them eat, and her mom noticed me and invited me in and gave me a meal. And it was one of the first times that somebody showed an act of kindness to me. And they moved away, and so I lost my only friend that I had at the time. The drug addicts got worse. I had a molestation issue with one of the addicts. And then after that, we almost got evicted. We had an eviction notice. So one night I said to my mother, why is our life like this? Why is our life this way? And she told us God punishes those who choose the wrong, who don't make good choices. And we weren't religious at the time. But telling a 6-year-old that this is our fault, we live this way, that 6-year-old would tell himself, it's my fault that our life is like this. So I would spend the next few weeks wandering the streets, looking at the sky, telling God I'm sorry, hoping that he would forgive me for whatever I did to have this life. And then later that night, after the few weeks, I had a dream that I was in my own room, instead of on the couch, had my own bed, nice clean sheets, and there was this window at the end of my bed. And the windows opened up, this light shined in, I heard a voice that said, Julius, be strong, be good to yourself, and be good to others. And that dream stayed with me from when I would go 9 o'clock. When I was 9 years old, I had like a really rough few years. When I was 13 and considering taking my own life, because most of the time we had no electricity, no hot water. All we had was moldy bread and rotten bologna to eat. I'd have to go rinse the slime off the bologna in order to eat it. And this was most of my life. So when I turned 13, when I was contemplating my suicide, I fell asleep and dreamt about that memory of when I was 6, when God told me to be strong, be good to myself, be good to others. So from that point on, I just focused on building myself up and being good to other people and being strong through any situation. So then when I turned about 21, I said I met my wife, and she was LDS. And I told her, because the rumors I heard about LDS people don't like black people, they only help those who are LDS. All these rumors from people who were no longer LDS. A lot of negativity, a lot of lies. I believe those things. And I told my wife I didn't want to be a part of a church that believes these things. She tried to reassure me that they didn't. But again, I was stubborn. So I told her I would go to church with her, I would support her and all that. I just didn't want to join the church. So we were going to she was going to Weber State University, and she was attending the student ward. So I would go with her, and after a few months of going, I was there at a fast testimony meeting, and this woman was up there speaking about her hardships and how she came into the gospel, and that really resonated with me. But of course, I was prideful, I was stubborn.
Of course.
My wife asked me, what'd you think about the meeting? I'm like, it was kind of boring. It was, I didn't like it.
Can't let her know.
Exactly.
Touched you,
Exactly. So then a few weeks later, we went down to her parents' ward, and they were talking about Joseph Smith and some of the trials he went through. And the person speaking was just saying, no matter all the stuff he went through, he stayed strong. And he was still helping people, still being good to other people, and still trying to keep himself holy. And after this person spoke, it reminded me of that dream I had when I was 13 from the memory I had when I was 6 about being good to myself, being strong, helping others. And so I heard God's voice again from when I was 6 years old. Be strong, be good to yourself, be good to others. And that kind of told me that I was in the right place. And that was the second time that I had felt the Spirit. And so on the way home, I told my wife, this is why we were dating. On our way home, we lived in different apartments up in Ogden. But on our way home, I told my girlfriend, who's now my wife, I said, hey, right now it's February. I'm guessing in December, I'll probably want to talk to some missionaries. She scoffed and started cracking up like I told her the biggest joke ever, And she's like, yeah, right, babe, you're funny. And then the next day, I'm like, maybe August, maybe July. A week later, I'm like, let's find some missionaries.
And just kept moving up.
Yeah, just kept getting stronger and stronger. I need to get this done. So we found the missionaries of our ward, pulled alongside them as they're walking up the street. And I was like, hey, you guys want to give me the discussions? And they're like, you're pulling us over, asking us, to give you discussions? And I'm like, yeah. And so they gave me the discussions. We got married at the Bountiful Temple, and we've just been going strong ever since.
That's awesome, man. That's awesome. Congrats on that, for sure.
Thank you.
Wow.
Okay, so this is, you guys know this about me, but you're learning this about me as well. We for every episode that we kind of get ready to sit down with, especially when we're inviting others to join us, or even when we're joining others, we kind of, go over the questions that we want to ask and the things that we want to touch. And then they say, hey, Crispin, can you lead the discussion? And I don't touch half of them. I just kind of do my own thing with it. But I have one more question for you, and I'm really interested to know. So you find the gospel, you know those feelings, and you end up here, you get married, and you're living Utah life, so to speak. That stereotypical Utah life. You and your wife are married in the temple, you're going to church, you've got this, restaurant, and slowly but surely you're ingratiating yourself into kind of how life here is in Utah. That at least stereotypically what people believe as far as the church. Have you had any resistance or backlash or issues within maybe your own family or your own community coming through that journey, whether that stems from Chicago to here, or once you were here and taking the steps that you took with your wife now to become who you are? Have you gone through any roadblocks or any backlash or any issues like that with taking those steps in your life and getting to where you are?
A couple. When my wife and I announced us getting married, a lot of people on her side were saying how she shouldn't do it. It's a sin to marry somebody outside your race. Mm-hmm. And your kids are going to struggle. They're going to get ridiculed and made fun of. And they had a lot of these old ways of thinking. And they would give her books from like the 1940s about why it's wrong to associate with black people and things like that. And which is really weird. On my end, being LDS, I had a couple cousins who didn't know anything about the church, but heard rumors, Yeah. They would talk about, did you know that they wouldn't give blacks the priesthood, And I was even in the barbershop getting my hair cut. And so I heard my wife and I talking as she was sitting there, and they're like, you're LDS? You know that blacks can have the priesthood? They treat them like a second-class citizens. And I'm like, well, for 400 years, we were slaves here, and y'all still here, So if y'all can deal with that, can I deal with, not having the priesthood, which I have now, And so, but most people are fine with it, I think. Utah is kind of hit or miss because there's a lot of people come here, a lot of black people come here, and they say they feel like Utah is prejudice. And I think it more is ignorance. I think a lot of people here, their only association with black folks is through music, TV, and movies, which rarely portrays us in the best light.
Right.
So they get their perception of us through those means. And so when we meet them and come in connection with them, they're kind of standoffish. They're kind of fearful. Mm-hmm. I'll have customers that'll kind of not talk to me when I try to touch their table, or they'll say, you can take the plates, and I'm like, I'm here to see how you like the food. Ask if anything we can do better, And so, and I noticed that, and that's one of the reasons I feel like my restaurant is important, because I want people to be okay with a different culture, a culture that's always been here, but I want them to be able to embrace it and be okay with it. Yeah. Even in the temple, my wife and I volunteered to usher at the Tazewell Temple. Mm-hmm. And by the elevator, there's a picture of a father giving a son a confirmation, a black father and a black son. Mm-hmm. And my wife and I are standing on the east side ushering people. And this lady gets off the elevator and she goes, are you in this photo? Is that why you're standing next to the photo? And I'm like, no, I'm just ushering, But and
can you see the photo? It's right here.
Guy's like 60.
I've seen that photo.
Yeah, too. Like the moment you said, I'm like, I love that photo.
Yeah. Right. And an hour later, this old guy gets off of there, and he goes, "Are you standing next to this photo for kinship?" And so I think a lot of white people when they meet me, they need to have to find an elaborate way to find a connection when really they can just say hi. Yes. They really overthink it.
Right.
I had a guy who said he was from Texas, and he said, "Is your family history from Texas?" He was eating the black eyed peas, and he loved them. And he said, "Is your family from Texas?" And I said, "No, why?" He goes, "Well, my great-grandfather had a black eyed pea from a plantation, and I didn't know if that's where your family came from. These black eyed peas are really good." So instead of just saying, "Hello, the food's great," he felt like he had to do some weird, elaborate thing, which came off really awkward. To connect with me.
Connect to it.
Yeah, exactly.
Connect with you.
Exactly.
Man.
That is funny, and eye-opening at the same time. But I really love the fact that I've asked that question, because from what I took from that, a lot of why you do what you do is why we made the podcast.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
We wanted to normalize what we do, our lives here. And, you know, as black people, we kind of know we know what our culture is. You know, we're black people, we are that culture. But, you know, white people, especially here in Utah in particular, are foreign to it.
Oh, yeah.
And the only exposure they have is, like you said, TV, movies, music. So they meet us, and a lot of those interactions stem from ignorance.
Yeah.
So in that ignorance, they're trying to not seem prejudice, or like there's an over exertion to not come off the way they think we might view them.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, because of the lack of knowledge or comfort being around us, you have those awkward or sometimes prejudice or absolute racist like interactions that you have. But it does stem, I think, from the same, a little bit of ignorance there. So in exposing them to us, you start to get comfortable around it. You start to see the culture, and it starts to become normal. Back where I'm from Texas, from Dallas, Texas to be exact. Lots of people everywhere. So the white people are used to the black people because we've been here the whole time. The Latino community is the same way. The Asian community there, the same way. We're so used to seeing all these different shades and all these different colors and cultures that it's not weird to have me walk into a restaurant, even if I might be the only black person there, simply because we've been here.
Yeah.
But in Utah, not so much.
Yeah.
Not so much. So we're trying to normalize that and spread that and let them know who we are, let them know that we're here. And just like them, we're just people in search of peace, in search of happiness, in search of, you know, success and prosperity the same way. So I love that. Thank you so much.
No problem.
Yeah, thanks for giving us this opportunity to talk to you and learn more about you and your business. And it's amazing, you know. It's really good to see another black brother doing what you're doing and have overcame some of those obstacles that are sometimes in our pathway at an early age, and you know, and we don't always know how to navigate them, but to be where you are today, that's what matters. And it's amazing to see that, you know, see that in real life, a real human that's trying to do what we're trying to do as well. So
thank you. Absolutely. So before we end this, and I do believe that we want to continue this conversation more, so we may have a second part with Julius if he'll indulge us with some of the other brothers as well. But before we end this one, I would love for you to kind of just maybe share some pearls of your own to any aspiring business owners out there, maybe restaurateurs. My daughter wants to be an author, and she's going to watch this episode, hopefully. She better tune in. But do you have any pearls or any tips or any advice that you want to give anybody who might be up and coming in the restaurant business, or just a business owner in and of themselves, maybe an author looking to kind of get started into something? Anything that you can give that helped you along the way?
Yeah, I think any business you want to start, it should start off with a passion. Doing something for monetary gain can only get you so far.
Yeah.
You're not going to work as hard as you will if it's just for money and status. If it's something you're passionate about, something you love to do, you're going to put in all the extra hours that nobody else will put in. And once you find out what your passion is, find a way that you can share with others, and that's how you create a business out of it. And I think that's why I did a restaurant, because nobody opens a restaurant to make money. We open a restaurant because it's something we want to share, something we want to experience, an experience we want to share with others, and a history and a culture. And that's why I did this. And as far as, you know, being an author, I think the best thing about that is to share what's inside. Everything we have inside is unique to only us. You know, we all offer unique experiences and unique lives that we've been through, and therefore we all have a unique perspective on this life and the world around us. And sharing that will help other people to educate themselves, which in turn better themselves and how they interact with others. And it kind of connects us all that way.
Love that. I love that. Thank you so much, and thank you for taking the time out with us to speak. And we hope to be back with some of the other brothers as well, because I know they have some things they want to ask. But
Absolutely.
But no, thank you so much. Really appreciate it. This is Brothers in the Foyer, and this is in particular is Julius Thompson, and we are here at his wonderful restaurant out here in Draper, Utah, Sauce Boss Southern Kitchen. If you haven't come on out, because the food is amazing. It will change your life for sure. And please go get this man's book, Pearls, the chronological interview of one of America's forgotten children by this man right here, Julius Thompson. You need to read it. It's a wonderful story, especially a story of triumph and things of that nature. So thank you so much again. Follow us, like, subscribe, share, and the information for Julius and his restaurant will be right below the video. Thank you so much.
Thank you.